Napoleon Bonaparte was not born a legend. He was born into obscurity on the rugged island of Corsica. His mother Letizia held his tiny fingers and whispered to him in Italian, praying that one day this boy would rise above the chains of poverty. The world around them was harsh, ruled by foreign kings and distant empires, but she believed that greatness could begin in silence. As a child, Napoleon was quiet, brooding, and fiercely intelligent. He didn't play like other boys. He read history, he memorized battles, he imagined empires. His older brother Joseph mocked his seriousness, but their mother always saw something different in Napoleon's eyes, a fire that refused to go out. At the age of 9, he left Corsica for military school in France. He was an outsider, often ridiculed for his accent and manners. But ridicule became fuel. His notebooks were filled with military strategies, not dreams. While other boys played, he plotted formations. He studied Caesar not just as a hero, but as a roadmap. The scars of loneliness only sharpened his resolve. Years passed, and Napoleon rose through the ranks. France itself was in turmoil. The monarchy had fallen. The revolution was tearing the nation apart. Amid the chaos, Napoleon found his calling. He wasn't just a soldier, he was a mind built for war. He proved this at Toulon, where he helped drive the British out of a strategic port. His brilliance turned heads, and his rise became unstoppable. General Desai, a fellow officer, once said, "Napoleon doesn't fight battles, he calculates them. With him, war feels like a game of chess, and he always sees 5 moves ahead." The real turning point came with the Italian campaign. The army he was given was starving, weak, and full of despair. But Napoleon didn't see weakness. He saw opportunity. He gave fiery speeches, led charges himself, and defeated Austria's powerful forces with unmatched strategy. In a matter of months, he turned a broken army into a conquering machine. Back in France, the people had grown tired of instability. They wanted order. They wanted power. Napoleon gave them both. In 1799, with calculated precision, he orchestrated a coup and declared himself first consul. Some called it betrayal of the revolution. Others called it salvation. Letizia, now older, watched her son with pride and fear. He had become everything she hoped for. But she also knew that power was a hungry beast. It never stopped asking for more. In 1804, in the Grand Cathedral of Notre Dame, Napoleon did what no Frenchman had dared. He took the crown from the Pope's hands and placed it on his own head. It was more than a coronation, it was a declaration. He wasn't just Emperor of the French, he was master of his destiny, to be continued. Josephine stood beneath the golden chandeliers of the royal palace, her hands trembling as the weight of the crown pressed upon her head. She had been a widow when she met Napoleon, a woman with charm but little status. He had loved her more than any empire. Yet even love in the palace of ambition is never safe. As Napoleon expanded his power, Josephine feared she would not be enough to give him what he wanted most, an heir. Outside the palace, Napoleon was no longer just France's ruler. He had become a force of nature sweeping across Europe. Kingdoms fell before him, allies bent their knees. He redrew borders like an artist with a brush dipped in blood. But every great storm eventually meets a mountain it cannot move. That mountain was Russia in 1812. Napoleon marched toward Moscow with over 600,000 soldiers. He believed Tsar Alexander would surrender quickly. But the Russian winter had other plans. As snow blanketed the fields and food vanished, men began to die not from bullets but from cold and hunger. By the time the army turned back, over 500,000 were gone. The Tsar had not defeated Napoleon with swords, but with time and frost. Back in France, the people began to doubt. The image of the invincible emperor had cracked. Enemies from every side began to close in. Britain, Prussia, Austria, Russia, the old world had united against one man. Among Napoleon's most loyal generals was Marshal Ney. He had followed him from victory to defeat and back again. When the empire started to crumble, Ney begged his master to surrender to save what was left. But Napoleon could not accept a world where he was not in command. He was exiled to the island of Elba, stripped of his crown and watched by his enemies. For most men, that would be the end. But Napoleon was not most men. In 1815 he escaped Elba and returned to France. When he stepped onto the mainland, soldiers sent to arrest him instead knelt before him. In a matter of days, he retook Paris without a single shot fired. The world watched in disbelief. The nightmare had returned. It all came down to one final battle. Waterloo, across the field, stood the Duke of Wellington, Britain's finest commander. Rain soaked the earth. Mud slowed the cannons. Smoke hid the sun. It was a brutal, chaotic clash of giants. Napoleon fought with the fire of a man trying to reverse fate. Ney charged again and again with broken troops and shattered hope. But the world had changed. The old tactics no longer worked. Reinforcements from Prussia sealed Napoleon's fate. He lost. And this time there would be no return. He was sent far away to the remote island of St. Helena, in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. No escape, no army, no crown, just memories and silence. There in the grey, windswept cliffs he wrote his story, watched the waves and waited for death. He died in 1821, a prisoner of history. But even now, centuries later, his name still burns. Not because he ruled, but because he dreamed larger than life and dared to try. This was Napoleon Bonaparte, the leader who aimed to rule Europe. And though he fell, his fire never truly died.